Hello, my name is Ellie Gettinger, and you are here for Museum Moments. Welcome to this very orange museum moment. Today, I am delighted to be with you as we are getting ready for the holiday of Passover, Pesach. Passover will start this Saturday at sundown. It makes for a complicated start for a holiday because it means you have to start the holiday. For many people who are observant to, follow the commandments more strictly, it means that everything for Passover has to be ready on Friday before Sabbath, before sundown, because on Saturday at sundown, that's when the Seders happen. So it's not just about preparing your Seder meals. It's about preparing a Sabbath meal, having your house all cleaned and all ready to go, and then moving into Passover. It adds like a whole extra day. It's a little bit complicated, but that's actually not going to be the focus of our museum moment today. Today, we are focusing on Matzah. And for all of you who are watching, how many people love matzah, hate matzah, enjoy eating matzah, and as Robin Cohen is saying, matzah everywhere, but now not a piece to eat. And that's one of the challenges of this Shabbat, is that we're not yet allowed to eat matzah because it's not yet Passover, but we can't eat bread still because we've cleaned our houses to be ready for Passover. What a challenge this is. So yes, matzah everywhere, and not a bite to eat. So this is that moment where we're going to explore how matzah has evolved and changed, and where does the tradition come from. So join me here as we get started. So Passover starts on Saturday and it goes till April 4th. It's one of the 8-day festivals. It's Passover, or Pesach, is the festival that explores, it's a pilgrimage festival. So it would have been the first of the 3 harvest holidays where people were taking sacrifices up to the temple in Jerusalem, when there was a temple in Jerusalem. But it commemorates also the going from the exodus from Egypt, the going from slavery to freedom. And there are all of these symbols within a Passover Seder, within that meal, that you employ to feel as though you're enslaved and then to feel as though you're free. And a lot of these symbols have kind of double meanings. And matzah is one of those. Matzah in the Seder is both called the bread of affliction and the bread of redemption, the bread of freedom. So it's both this bread that is a symbol of slavery. It's dry, it's crusty, it's not always the best tasting. Some people love it, I don't. And then on the other hand, this is the bread that carried us to freedom. It got us out of the land of Egypt. So it has one of those significant double meanings. And this is a Seder plate. So these are all of those symbolic foods that we would have eaten, that we will eat at a Passover Seder. Each one of them has some sort of symbolism regarding either freedom and slavery, or, spring and kind of the circle of life. There are lots of different ways of engaging, but it really is a tactile sensory experience. And I think matzah is a part of that. It's dryness. So matzah itself there are very specific rules governing matzah. Oh, Robin loves matzah. She can't wait. Ooh, I am not a matzah lover. And it is created, it's very simple. It requires exactly 2 ingredients: bread, water, and flour. And there are 5 different flours you can use in it. And we'll get into that in a second. But I think the real technical things is it goes back to this verse in the Torah that says, "And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had taken out of Egypt, for it was not leavened, since they had been driven out of Egypt and could not delay, nor had they prepared any provisions for themselves." So they had to leave quickly. And, in that way that any of us have had to leave somewhere quickly, you don't have time to prepare to bring loaves of bread. Instead, or to take the time to bake bread after bread after bread to bring with you, they were laying out their bread, baking it as fast as they could. There was no time for it to rise. And this is the origin of matzah. So it's interesting that we call it the bread of affliction, because it wouldn't have been bread that was actually eaten while you were in slavery. It's the bread that was taking you from slavery to freedom. Let's talk about the process of making matzah, because it's interesting. And it's interesting, you can find, I think most of us have never made matzah by hand, but there are processes in which you can do this. Here you see both very old school with a wood burning stove. And this is also a process of making a shmora matzah. The guy on the top is making what is called a shmora or guarded matzah. This process, I'm going to take you through the process briefly. Know that if you're making shmora matzah, it's even more complicated because the grain itself is watched from the moment it's harvested until the moment that it becomes the grain that you're making until it's baked, to make sure that no leavening agent is in there, that it's such a specific process. This grain has been watched from that entire process, from being milled to being ground up to being processed, to ensure that nothing is in there to help that dough rise. So if we're making matzah, you're going to set a timer. The whole process, from the time in which your flour meets the water, can take no more than 18 minutes. The feeling being that after 18 minutes, something will happen to make this dough start to rise. So 18 minutes total. Most people set an alarm for 16 minutes. Flour can be whole grain or refined, but it must be made from one of these 5 grains: wheat, spelt, barley, rye, or oat. Most matzah that I've encountered is made of wheat. I'm interested in what spelt or barley matzah would taste like. And you mix it with water and you roll out your dough. And the thing that's unusual is you are not using any sort of rising agent like yeast or baking powder or any of those. You're rolling it out quickly, and that's in that 18-minute time period. And then once you're done with that, you're pricking it with some sort of fork or tool to keep the dough from rising. And then you're going to cook it at a high heat until it's golden or brown, and you pull it out. You might have to flip it, but it's a very quick process, the whole thing, from start to finish. There are recipes you can find online to create your own matzah. Feel free to try it out and let us know how it goes. So matzah as a process was generally made in small communities. It was made by synagogues. It was taken on, as kind of a communal mitzvah, something to do. Generally, people weren't making it for themselves, but it was the sort of thing that maybe the synagogues in a community were making this. In the 1830s, a guy named Isaac Singer, not to be confused with the inventor of the sewing machine, invented a matzah dough rolling machine. And this caused an immense amount of controversy at the time, because the question was, did this really fulfill the commandment of matzah? Does it enable, if something that makes the bread more easy to make, does that take away the sense of the tactile connection to matzah making? And there was a lot of back and forth on this at the time. Oh, should we really use this machine? Should we not use the machine? They go back and forth. And there are all sorts of, there's a rabbi, I think in Lithuania, who writes a whole opinion against it. And then his brother writes an opinion for it. One of the feelings for it is that it's democratizing Passover. It's making matzah more affordable for more people. This all comes to a head in America, where you have a guy named Rabbi Dov Ber Manischewitz. You guys can see where this story is going. And actually, Dov Ber is the gentleman that is to my, that is drawn there. That he sets up a small bakery in Cincinnati, Ohio in 1888 to produce matzah. And he actually had this rabbinic standing. He had studied Talmud for 13 years. And so there's a sense that if anyone knows this, then we're going to trust him. And it's also, think about that, 1888, it's right as we're getting into the Industrial Revolution. More and more of cooking is moving out of the realm of home life and into the realm of being mechanized and store-bought. And he is coming up with this process to mechanize matzah making. And if you see matzah today, all of us picture the square sheets. Before that, they'd been much more regular. It's much cheaper and much more efficient to do a square as opposed to a round, because you can work out to cut. You save. Elliot Ratzman has some Cincy pride. Yes. The factory today is in New Jersey, so they moved on, and it's like a 2-block industrial industrial sense. They produce way more matzah than anybody else in the country and anybody else in the world. I think that they are, even in Israel, they're the leader. Manischewitz is the leader. So this guy then is able to kind of push the Jews in this country to say, wait, it's not going to be an issue if we're eating matzah that isn't been made by hand, that there was a little bit more acceptance. Probably as America grows, this works into the whole immigrant kind of feeling of the country. And Manischewitz is a huge conglomerate. The family sold the business in the 1990s for $40 million. I'm sure it's worth way more than that now. But it gives you the sense of the way we think of matzah for generations, for millennia. That's not the way people would picture it. And there were all sorts of variations. And in fact, in some parts of the world, matzah can be a soft bread, kind of more akin to a pita or a naan, which sounds to me like a little bit less of a bread of affliction and maybe more of a bread of redemption. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, matzah is readily available at most grocery stores. The interesting thing to note is that you have to look, if you're really being observant of Passover, to know if your matzah is kosher for Passover, because there is matzah that is made year-round that doesn't necessarily always fit the same sort of criteria. So make sure you got that kosher for Passover on there. I want to thank you all for joining me. I'm going to not be here next week as I am munching on my matzah. We are taking a little bit of a Passover break on Museum Moments. Thanks always to Robin Cohen, who is our tremendous Museum Moment maven. And if you want to learn more about Jewish Museum Milwaukee or any of our programs, check us out at jewishmuseummilwaukee.org. Thank you guys so much and have a wonderful Passover holiday.